Hello, my friends. I'm Rick, and this is Yours Through the Table. But hey, you already know that spiel by now if you're a regular viewer of my channel. We are looking at first edition Dungeons and Dragon material that I've acquired over the years, and you know, we're coming down to an end on my collection for first edition because I really only had a handful of the core books and stuff, and I've already done videos on those. There were other material, obviously there was other stuff that came out, but I chose not to buy those at that time for whatever reason. A lot of it was modules. It wasn't shortly after the introduction of these that we see the second edition material starting to come out, and I have a whole lot more of that than I do this stuff. But Dragonlance is an alternate realm or an alternate sandbox for you to play with Dungeons and Dragons. And of course, Forgotten Realms is the 800-pound gorilla of that. Greyhawk was the original version of that. I don't have my original Greyhawk box set and stuff that I used to have. That was part of the material I gave to my oldest son, and God knows what he did with it. Him and I are estranged, so I have no way to ever ask him about it. Anyway, so when Dragonlance came out, we're back to that apples and orange thing. When you have a limited budget, you can focus on certain things, or you get a broad range of stuff but very little depth, or you can get a lot of depth on a narrow few. So I chose Forgotten Realms. I enjoyed Forgotten Realms more. The novels read better or easier for me. I have read a number of Dragonlance novels in my lifetime. I don't own any of them, and that's a significant thing. If I don't really own something, then I'm not a big fan on it. I didn't buy into it. I got this because at the time it came out, and like I said, if it had the title AD&D Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, I bought it. It's like BattleTech. If I was or Shadowrun, whatever I'm in at the time, I bought it all as fast and as often as I could, and sometimes to the exclusion of others. This book does a good job is give us an overview of the differences between the sandbox, the game world, as opposed to, say, Forgotten Realms. And there's definitely some significant differences with the Dragonlance era of stuff, and it's to the core differences. I paid $15 for this book, and what year was this? What year is it? 1987. So we got our preface, the realms above, wizards, etc., etc. So we get our beginnings of the story of the history of the Dragonlance realm and what's going on in there. Major characters in Krynn, standard classes, travelers from beyond. So they actually they actually address. This is not normal for a lot of game systems to do this, but they actually, because dimensional travel is a big thing in Dungeons and Dragons. Moving between the planes and between this and that and the other thing, it's far more common than not. So it actually explains what they call travelers from beyond. So people that, for a cleric, for example, that comes to Krynn, who are coming from Forgotten Realms, that comes to Dragonlance, he's been cut off, or he or she may be cut off from their deity, because this is a realm where entirely different set of deities rule. So their limitations might be affected by their ability to what spells they can cast and what other things they can do based on whether or not they're native to the planet. And this is what this kind of helps. Acceptable character classes, travels beyond, general limitations, what's your alignment. Then we got the Knights of Solamnia, the Oath and Measure, Knights of the Sword, Knights of the Crown, Knights of the Rose, the Tinker Gnomes, or Gnomes, they're Tinkers. Really puts a different twist. You know, a lot of people don't care for gnomes in Dungeons & Dragons anyway, because they're considered, I don't know, they're kind of half halfling and half dwarf. They're distinct enough to be an entity to themselves, but it's not played up. Their strengths are played down, and for a lot of people, they're too milquetoast. gnomes are too milquetoast for a lot of people to want to play them, and there's some subtle nuances. I've played gnomes a couple times, especially when the ones that are high, the illusionary spells and things like this are their forte. So, Dragonlance's take on gnomes is vastly different, and over time, through generations, we actually see some of this translate over into the mainline gnomes for Dungeons and Dragons, because in the early days they were more like your garden gnome variety kind of stuff, and less like the mad scientist kind that get the most press. And I think the Tinker version of the gnomes actually is the better of all of them I've seen, in part because it really gives them depth. Yeah, they are absurd. They're crazy. They're dangerous. How they've managed not to obliterate themselves along the way is, part of their story. It's just the way things are. So there's a whole number of chapters dealing on that stuff in here, and some of their crazy inventions and their philosophy and their main world and so on and so forth. And then we get into how wizards work. Wizards work a little different in Dragonlance than they do in Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not familiar enough with it to make any real commentaries on it, to be honest. Because, like I said, I've never played a Dragonlance setting. Uh, I think I got one module I bought because it was interesting, and I got this book. That's it. That's just the way it is, but it's part of my collection. Gender and the gods. So all this section on gods and clerics and things like that. The Pantheon for Krynn. And we got races of Krynn, the Age of Twilight, the Kender. You gotta love or hate these guys. Once again, it's a different take on the halfling, the hobbit. At the time, TSR was getting some cease and desist letters and angry rhetoric for some lawyers that came from J.R.R. Tolkien's estate, saying that, hey, the term hobbit is copyrighted. As a matter of fact, I understand that they actually wanted, they also wanted to lay claim to dragons, elves, dwarves, and some other stuff, and TSR at the time gave them the middle bird and told them where to go. And that's how that played out, because there's certain that you can't lay claim to a dragon. That's in human history and mythology for as long as we've had mythology. So kick rocks. The Kender's real claim to fame is the fact that they're kleptomaniacs. Their entire social structure doesn't see thieving or theft as a problem. Obviously, you didn't want that, or I was just looking at it, or I don't know where it came from, right? So, some of the most pain in the ass characters I've had to ever deal with from a game master, dungeon master perspective has to do with damn Kender. And so even though I've never played in the Dragonlance world or ran anything, I have had more than my share of players say, can I play a Kender? And the only reason I know what the hell Kender was is because I got this book. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to let you do that. But, I try to cater to my players as much as I can. Because, okay, so how would your character have gotten here in the first place? Well, I don't know. We woke up and, I don't know, some wizard dragged me along or whatever. But the point is they just want to have this fun adventure of stealing shit all the time and not being held accountable for it, I think. So it has more than a share of its challenges to operate. So, Tinker Gnomes, still going on about the gnomes, Beyond the Mountain, the elves, the Ancelon, the elf races in Dragonlance are also a bit different from Forgotten Realms. Obviously, for literary purposes, they wanted them to stand out and be their own elves, if you will. And so they've done their best to do that. And for me, an elf is an elf. It doesn't matter what you call a wood elf is still a wood elf. There's certain tendencies that wood elves or wild elves or high elves all share, and that's what makes them the class that they are. Dark elves, ironically, dark elves in the Dragonlance world is not references to drow. Dark elves are references to elves that came from beyond. So elves that did not originate on Krynn are considered dark elves. And if you have any knowledge of Dungeons and Dragons on a larger scale, you understand that not only with the inclusion of Spelljammer, we actually have space travel or star travel in addition to planar travel, where we can travel between the planes, and time travel. It's just anything you want goes. So that's kind of how that references to the dwarves. There's a lot of commonality. Dwarves are dwarves, and there's certain expectations when somebody mentions a dwarf in a fantasy role-playing setting, and dwarves, Glimmereye is the common conception when they come to life. But there's some significant differences between the dwarves within the dwarf races themselves. I guess races is not a PC thing to say these days. Whatever. The genomes of the dwarves vary, and we see here's the first appearance of gully dwarfs outside of a dragon. I don't know if it was Dragon or Dungeon magazine that they first cropped up in, but so there's some significant differences, and so on and so forth. And then we have a race that's distinctive to Krynn or to Dragonlance, and that's the Minotaurs. The Minotaurs are considered monsters in most mainline Dungeons and Dragons settings, but the fact of the matter is, in later generations, like a lot of things, they became a playable race. And this predates that because they're actually an ancient race that has a lot of history with Krynn going on. So we get into some character proficiencies, non-weapon proficiency, new proficiencies. We get some small monster manual creatures of Krynn. Welcome to Draconians, which, if you really want to make the argument, is where the Dragonborn came from. Now, the Dragonborn of more modern versions of Dungeons & Dragons is considerably different from what came in here, but there's a lot of similarities too, and I choose to believe that they're bloody well the same damn thing. In my opinion, Of course, we have quite a variety of them, and they make for good bad guys. It's Dragonlance's version of the damn orcs in somebody's vernacular. We got some other, Shadow People, Bloodsea Minotaurs, Ice Bears, the Fetch, Spectral Minions, so on and so forth, and Dragons. Dragons play a significantly more important role in Dragonlance, hence Dragonlance, than in the title, as opposed to, say, Forgotten Realms. Forgotten Realms dragons do play a lot of roles, don't get me wrong, but there's some significant differences in how it's portrayed. So we have the world that was, basically the history of Krynn and Dragonlance Saga. And then we get some odds and ends, some artifacts, some weapons, other nice little knickknacks for your characters to scramble and drool over and wish for, and get delivered by the great dwarven Santa Claus, overkill. So anyway, some interesting character supporting characters and stuff. This, like I said, I've read it a couple times over the years, and I recently reread this a couple weeks ago, just in preparation. So the video, sometimes I know my videos come across as being a little bit all over the place, and I do read my stuff. I do go back and reread this stuff, although depending on how long it's been sitting up here on the table, it actually gets in the queue, how much of it I've retained. I'm getting old. It is part of the nature of the business. So anyway, that's the Dragonlance sourcebook. If what's another one of the things that set these books apart is the orange binding in these versions. So the very original hardback, the AD&D books did not have these, and their artwork were different. The later ones that came out are still first edition, so this is still considered first edition. And by this time, the artwork had changed on the Monster Manual, the Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook had changed, but the fact was they all still had this orange, they all included this orange binder back mark. So when they sit on your shelf, they stand out a little bit from the others that are on the shelf. So, just my opinion on that. Anyway, till next time, you guys have a great weekend. Going on, my friends? This is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out, right? Till next time, I hope you guys have yourself